So I'm starting to wonder, is the question about, it's not about like living and into old age, well, it's about becoming comfortable with dying.
I'm Heather Grzych, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Kate O'Donnell. Kate is a nationally certified Ayurvedic practitioner. She's a senior yoga teacher and the author of multiple Ayurvedic books, including the Everyday Ayurveda Guide to Self-Care and the Everyday Ayurveda Cookbook, a seasonal guide to eating and living well. She studied in India for 20 years and continues to travel there annually for study. She's a contributor to many publications, including Yoga Journal, Women's Health Magazine, and NPR. And she teaches trainings, cooking classes, seasonal cleanses, retreats, and online programs when she's not practicing yoga herself or having a chai. Kate, her Ayurveda offerings aim to help others come closer to their true nature, and she's based in Portland, Maine, and teaches internationally. Thank you so much for being here today, Kate.
Thanks. It's good to see you, Heather.
Okay, so today, Kate and I are going to have a conversation about aging, and we're both around the same age, I think, right, Kate? 77?
78, yeah.
All right, so okay. Yep, so you're younger than me. And so we're kind of in that middle 40s. We're like not old, but we're not young. And we're in this, like, I think it's a really great sweet spot because you start to, like, you're still young enough. You can do all these amazing things, right? But then you're starting to feel more of what you're getting yourself into, in those future years. You start to get those little insights about, at least that's been my experience. So, Kate and I are going to have a really great conversation today about this and to help you think about how you're aging or how you plan to age and what you can do to feel your best in that process. So I thought this was super interesting, Kate. Did you know that by the year 2035 that there will be more older adults than kids? So usually, yeah.
Like, what does older mean?
So over 65.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that because people are living longer?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And also because people are having fewer children. So the birth rates have been falling for quite some time. And this is in the US, right? So birth rates have been falling in a lot of the developed countries, but they're still quite high in some countries like Syria and Yemen, and oddly sort of war-torn countries seem to have very high birth rates. But these comfy, cozy kinds of cultures tend to have lower birth rates. And then that combined with the fact that people are living longer for various reasons, which we can talk about, that's creating a situation where there's going to be a lot more older people. And for me, it's not that weird because I live in a town where there's a lot of old people. So I feel like I already know what that world looks like in a very small scale. But in another town where there may be more of an even distribution of the different age bands, that could be a really weird thing to feel, What's it like where you live?
Yeah, it's funny because we were celebrating my husband's birthday last week. So we went to a fancy restaurant and I made a reservation for 6:00. And at one point I looked around the restaurant and I was like, we are the youngest people in this restaurant, And our town is I would say it's pretty hip. It's a very hip town. A couple of days ago, we went out and it was like the opposite experience where we looked around and I was like, oh, now we're the oldest people here. Like everyone was young and like so hip and cool. I couldn't even believe it. So stylish. So I would say, I think that Maine has traditionally been one of those places where they'll actually pay you to move here if you're under 40. I don't know that they're still doing that, but they were doing that when we moved here. So they're just, all the people move away from Maine. But now Portland being the city and sort of the southern part of the state, there's a lot more younger people here. The street and the neighborhood where we live, most of the people have been in their homes for 30 or 40 years. So like our neighbors on both sides, their kids are all grown up and gone away and all that. So I feel like a lot of my friends are older than me. I've always hung out with older people, but also because I don't have children, a lot of the people my own age, their kids are still like, they're still very much consumed by it. So I have friends their kids are grown up so they can hang out with me. And yeah, I don't feel like, one of the reasons I reached out about having this conversation was that I was feeling a lack of role models, like solid role models, people I can look to who are in their 70s and 80s and say, like, I want to emulate that. I don't see a lot of that in my life. Do you?
Wow. Yeah. Well, my answer is no. And it's kind of a heavy question for me because I actually think about this a lot. I think about, as before there was so much medical technology and pharmaceuticals, you probably had people aging, the ones that were still here when they were very old. There was a reason that they were still here when they had wisdom. They had knowledge about their body. They honored, nature. And now we have so many people living who don't have that connection, who don't have that wisdom, and who are being kept alive by drugs and machines. And I don't want to talk badly about that, but that's not how I want to live when I get older. And, we all have things that, best laid plans. You never know what's going to happen to you in life, but that's not how I want to age. I want to age with as little pharmaceuticals as possible. I want to age with as little medical technology as possible. And so when we look at our elders, it feels like we aren't sure they're really that wise. And why would we listen to them? I don't know. I feel like that a lot.
Right. Yeah. Where I've been looking at the quality of life of the elders and being like, is that what we want? It's like these bodies being kept alive, but I don't know that it's a great quality of life in a lot of situations. And my father has dementia, he's 90. So that, like, it's kind of normal,
Yeah.
But he is wise. He is I miss his counsel a lot. He's someone that I would listen to, have always listened to. But he's no longer very present in the mind. And I think that's something we're seeing a lot more of in the current time. There's these whole centers now for elder care. I think they call it memory care.
Yeah.
So I think that this is like a new thing. Because like you're saying, back in like ancient times, if somebody had dementia, I don't know that they would stay alive.
Yeah.
It's like to keep people alive when they're in that state.
I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. And especially if you have this really close connection with him, I know that when the mind starts going, it can really affect that with people. And yeah, because more people are going to be living longer, it makes me wonder the quality of the minds of the collective population that we have will be challenged, and there'll be a lot of care that's needed for those populations. All the healthcare jobs will probably change. I mean, they're changing already. But also, like, going back to using, your father as an example, well, if he's 90 and he gets dementia, he's one. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that is someone that you can look at and have a role model, as opposed to someone who's getting that at 50 or 60 or 70, right? And I look at, so my partner's stepfather, that's kind of confusing. My partner's stepfather, he passed away a couple of years ago, and he was 96. And he actually was sharp as a tack until the day he passed. And he wrote a book the year, like right before he passed, he was writing a book about political scientist and a political satirist, and he was a professor at UCLA, and he really hated Trump. And so he wouldn't die. Like he wanted to stick around because it was like fueling him, that he didn't want to see Trump elected. And it was, so he's like writing about US and British politics, and he didn't know how this was going to end with Trump. It was like during the election, the Biden election. And it was kind of keeping him here. It was really super interesting, his interest in that. My sister and I always talk about my grandma, who's 91, and she's also pretty sharp. And I always tell people, I don't think that the key to life is happiness, because my grandma is one of the grumpiest people I've met. Like, she will complain all the time, but she continues kicking, right? So if like everybody thinks the goal of life is to be healthy and happy, is that really the case? Like, is it really the case to be happy? When I look at my grandma, who's like a little, doesn't seem very happy, but somehow has this fire that keeps her going.
Right. It's like there needs to be a driving influence, like to, the political work. Or I also think some people live life, by rubbing against things. And that's their expression, and it's like, maybe if she were copacetic, she'd be upset. She wouldn't like it, maybe like that is just how she interacts, is by being curmudgeon-y. And that's actually it's just how she does life. But there's like as you said, an energy to it and a fire to it. And I think that keeps bodies alive, keeps people going. And it's so interesting how the thing that lives in bodies that keeps them alive seems to be a subtle influencer, not a physical one. So yeah, we have our physical tissues and our ojas and all that stuff, but it's really interesting, especially like being so close to my dad too, to observe the mind, on how the mind, it for me is big because there is dementia in my family. So that's me. And my dad and I are so similar in constitution, and his sister also. So it's like, that's when I look at aging, I'm looking at mental acuity kind of more than anything else, maybe bones as well, but just in observing sort of the types of things that are in my genetics. And so the role of the mind in aging and also in death and dying is so interesting. And I'm kind of starting to wonder, Heather, is like, do we need to be talking not so much about like aging well, but actually dying well? Like maybe that's the deficit, is that, of course, we all want longevity. We all want to age well and be, supple and whatever. We want less suffering as we get older. And that's one of the things that's been really striking to me, is the amount of suffering in the elders that I have been close to as they get older. And a lot of that's physical, but there's also mental suffering, and I think if we look at sort of the philosophies behind yoga and Ayurveda, a lot of it does have to do with embracing death and learning how to let go of attachments, and so I'm starting to wonder, is the question about, it's not about like living and into old age, well, it's about becoming comfortable with dying. I really feel like if that's maybe the thing that we can be working on in order to approach our later years with almost a philosophical bolstering, so that we're ready. And I think yoga, like so much of how I understand yoga philosophy, is being ready to die properly so that you don't carry all your karmas with you. And this idea that in this sort of paradigm, that as you get older, you devote more time towards burning karma as opposed to creating new karma, which is like completely different from how the previous decades in our lives have been. And it's also at odds with our culture, the culture that is so productive. It's so much about like in relationship to life, the movement aspect of life, where people are doing this and they're going there, and you want to still be able to travel. And, there's all these ideals that we have. But in the Eastern perspective, at least according to yoga and Ayurveda, it's actually the pinnacle of success is to be prepared for the moment of death. I'm less interested in the moment right now than I am in like the decade or two that precede the moment of death. And I do believe there's a lot in Ayurveda and in yoga and those philosophies that we need, all of these people, as you said with the statistic there, all these people who are getting older, man, like we need to start learning how to do it well, the dying part, and when you say, you want to die without pharmaceuticals or with less, let's say, right? So you don't want to age on a bunch of pharmaceuticals and with a bunch of medical interventions, which I totally understand that. And it's like the question that comes to my mind when you say that is like, what about suffering? Because the shit that happens to bodies, it's gnarly. And one of the reasons I thought about you, Heather, for this conversation was because the last time we talked, you, I think, had just been with your partner's father-in-law in the dying process. And you were talking a little bit about some of the physicality of it. And that's why I was like, oh yeah, like you've been around dying somewhat recently.
Yeah. I've also been around tremendous suffering. There's diabetes in my family, and my father had to have an amputation this year.
Oh God.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you look at, and people don't understand about diabetes, type 1 diabetes, obviously that's a different ballgame. But with type 2 diabetes, where it is largely behavioral, and people don't realize how serious it is just from not balancing their sugar, the water element, in the body. And I think what people go through as they age is you constantly get these new realities, right? So as you grow, you get new realities, but they're always new. And I think they somehow build upon each other, and there's less of a sense of I'm losing something like in the earlier years of your life. But if you have, as you age and as you start to lose certain abilities, like athletes who are, really hardcore athletes, or, the Ashtanga yoga practice you used to do, or the Ashtanga yoga practice I used to do, or the, whatever kind of intensity that we had to us, the things that we could accomplish, or that our will could allow us to do because our bodies were so robust, or the tolerant to things, that if you try to do those things as you age, you have a different relationship with them and your tissues are different. And I think that the realization that your body is different and also somewhat limited in its capacity from what it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago or something like that, it's an adjustment for people to go through. And I'm not saying you lose capacity altogether, but you notice these little things like, I used to be able to do this. I used to be able to do this. And I don't think you have that when you're younger because, well, for me, I was always gaining new skills. I always felt like I was growing when I was younger. And now if I continue to grow, I also remember the things that my body couldn't do. I mean, the body could do that it can't quite do the same way now.
Yes. Yeah. Which is, I mean, we're right in that pocket, I think, in the mid 40s. I feel like this is when we all start talking about this. Where you start to hear yourself say, I used to be able to X or Y, And I think that the most skillful, like the best skill that we can bring to the process is acceptance. I really believe that is true. And this comes from observing my dad in the struggle that it has been to accept the lack of, say, mobility, like big things, like, and then I think about, I can't do like a back bend like I used to be able to. And I'm upset. Whereas like my dad can't get out of a chair, can't get in and out of bed. It's like we're just in that place where we start to contend with a letting go, with an acceptance of things. And how I've been very interested in grace, how do I listened to Dr. Svoboda talk about, he was talking about ojas, fertility was wrapped in there, and how Mother Nature turns her gaze away from people when they're no longer procreating. And she brings her prana, and her attention or shakti to the people who are still doing that. And I was like, it made me so sad. I felt so sad to hear. And there, a lot of this conversation is very sad for me. And that's where I want to grow. You know, that's what I want. I want to be in a place where I can be aging and letting go of things and being like, yes, this is the law of nature. And this is because this is true. This is like a truth of being in this body in this on this planet. It's beautiful and amazing because it is true. You know, where a lot of the conversation about aging is about not doing it, or at least not looking like you are, you know, putting all the oil on and the this and the that, you know, and eating all your just boosting foods. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but I think that work needs to be like in tandem with this other work around our behaviors, you know, and our approach to it. And it's very much a philosophical thing, I think.
So, I'm starting to get more interested in this, but, since you brought up the thing about Robert Svoboda, after I had a kid when I was 40, right? So I had lived a lot of life without having a kid and full adult life already by the time I had a kid. And now raising a kid and how that goes, and you start to feel like you're seeing this little being grow. They're just beginning their life. They're just beginning it. And yours is, you're on the hill, you're at the top of the hill. And then soon you're going to start going down. And one of the things I always had in my mind when I was kind of entering that journey to motherhood, because I took so long to enter it, I was like, I know that my being a parent will end someday, like in terms of what this person needs from me, or parenting. I knew I'd always had this child. He's always my child, whether he's, living in Thailand or whatever. But I will not be spending my time being a parent. And so I always had that as my long view when I came into the journey. And I had interviewed a lot of mothers before having the child because I wanted to know what kind of mother life I wanted. Because I was seeing some of them struggle when their kids started growing to be a certain age and they weren't needed as much. And because there's a big service component. If you're a person who likes service, being a parent is quite satisfying in that regard. But there's also other ways that we give service in the world. And so I think, for me, I always knew that I would have this phase of great service to this one being, but then I would, in order for me to have a reason to live, essentially, right? Because just eating Trader Joe's chocolate peanut butter cups and watching, Netflix or whatever, it's not enough, right?
Right.
Or climbing a mountain. These things, they kind of keep us, but they're also not enough. And so I always knew that my life would be about where I'm giving my service to in different moments at different times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that really influenced how I parent. Yeah.
What do you see yourself? I mean, maybe you don't know this yet, but what's your long view of service when your kid is no longer requiring you?
I think I get little glimpses of it, so I still work and I have a child and he's in school during the day and I'm able to, get work done when he's at school. And that's new because, the pandemic, that wasn't possible. But the last 2 years I've been able to do more service to other people because I'm not spending my day being in service to this other being. But I think that'll change, if he's going to start taking breakdancing, whatever. Then I got to drive around if I become a soccer mom or something. But, I'm able to teach more. I'm just able to do my work more. Whereas I feel like there may be things I want to do that I can't do because I've prioritized this other person above my service to other people. Mm-hmm. And that factors into my weekly schedule and everything.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, there are ways I serve outside of my home, outside of my family now. And I just think those will increase. And I think where people get stuck in the child rearing things is if they don't keep those outside of the home service things going, they lose skills, they lose connections. And so when their child doesn't need them anymore, they're kind of lost.
Oh, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
complete sense. Which this is sort of the other side of that coin, but I gone through a thing in the past 5 or 6 years where without my work, I feel like that because I've been so work focused for so long. And so I've been starting to challenge myself to not work so much. And then, I was like, well, I don't know what I even like to do. I don't even know what that is. And as I wrote this last book, book number 4, I was like, and I've said this before, Heather, but I was like, I think this is my last book. Like, seriously, for real this time. I don't think I'm going to do it again. And then I'm like, what am I going to do? So I bought a bicycle and a paddleboard, and I moved near the ocean. That's basically what I'm choosing. In what I would like to do is like experience being in my body in nature. That's what I want to do. And just like, I just want to be present. And that's what I feel when I'm like on a bicycle or on a paddleboard, which is why I have those two things. And it again feels to me connected to my like philosophical obsession at this stage of life, with really like investigating where is the grace in this transition. Like, how do we do this? How do we do it well? Is it, oil enema, or is it a food thing? And I think for me right now, anyway, it's about like experiencing my body in nature, like with the Mahabhutas. Like, I love to be on the water, and there's just like, there's seals and fish and all these other creatures that aren't human. And that to me is like, that is very medicinal, to be around creatures that are not human. And it's this circle of life sort of feeling, that I get. And that's the feeling, is to be immersed in the movements of life without an agenda. Because I think I get into thinking like, oh, what will I do when I'm older? How will I be relevant? And then it's like, that truth of the natural way of things is just to be in the body and just experience, what the senses are bringing in. And that's it. And I'm lucky that, like you, I do have meaningful work, and I think I'll keep teaching. And I do feel like the more that I embody nature, the more I have to share as a teacher, and the pharmaceuticals and the medical interventions. It's difficult in this moment for me to see how these things go together. Like yeah. It's some of the interventions that I've seen with elderly recently have seemed like unnatural. And we're getting to this place sometimes where it's like, should we be doing these interventions, or should we be allowing people to move on? And I think that is also potentially a problem in how we're doing dying. And it worries me, but it's easy for me to say because I'm not faced with death right now, and I'm not in immeasurable suffering either. So it's all just kind of, it's talk, for me at this point. And the truth will come out when it happens, when I'm faced with choices like that, So like, what I love about this conversation is that we're not sitting here talking about like how to be more youthful. Top 5 things to keep you looking youthful. It's more, well, I want to hear women talking about like, this is what's going on with my body. This is what's going on with my relationship to life as I get older. That is what I want to be listening to. I want to see that on social media. I want to see that in like the Hollywood movies. It's like, that's what we need, I think, are these like real representations of aging, of death, and of dying, kind of a normalization of the process. This is what I want. And this is, I feel like you and I can even sit here and talk about all the gnarly stuff that we've seen, in the past several years with our elders, that we see in our own bodies. It's like, I feel like that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah, I think even something very small like the gray hair thing, where we've grown up with everyone older than us dyeing their hair. My great
Yeah.
grandmother dyed her hair until I think she was 92 or 93 when she died. And she dyed her hair until she died, I think, right up until she died. I would go into the nursing home where she lived, and there'd be all these little white puffy heads, and then her. And, it's been hard for me not to dye my hair. I'm really lucky in that I just get like these Bride of Frankenstein grays on the side. Like I haven't gotten a ton of gray, but I have a hard time not dyeing them. Sometimes I look at them and I'm like, no, I don't want to admit that you're there. I don't want to admit that you're there, gray hair. And I would imagine there are some people who go get gray very, very, very early. And I had a friend who was gray, I think around 30. She was like almost fully gray. I had another friend who was 26 and fully gray. And they'll be dyeing their hair forever, And I mean, I kind of have a plan about like gradually going gray as I go older, but that's like one example, like you're saying, with acceptance and our wanting to change what's really there to make it something else. And I think that's also when you talk about medical interventions, when we're faced with something, the question of certain things should we be doing? And we do have a culture that is very fix-it oriented. I have a health thing where I have an aneurysm in my finger. It's like the weirdest thing. It's due to a vascular abnormality combined with, being a softball player and throwing a ball for 30 years, maybe combined with something my mom ate when I was in her belly. It's multi-layered and it's never going to go away. And it has limited my life in a lot of ways. And when I tell people about it, what they say always is, can't you get that fixed? And I go, well, it's interesting because I talked it over with multiple surgeons and things like that. And everybody actually agreed that if I could just keep it from getting worse, that would be the best thing. If I could just keep it from getting worse. And so I think that's another aspect to this, is that we don't always have to fix something. Sometimes we can just leave it right the way it is and make adjustments in our lives. And to me, that's where grace is. Grace also can come in other forms, but for me, that's where the grace is. And the humility and the surrender and the abiding, like the abiding to something bigger than me, that like this happened and I'm going to make changes that will not make it worse. I agree to that. That's my new contract.
Right. Yeah. I like that. I like that. Yeah. Because there's some things there's changes that are natural, right? And then there's the ones that are pathological. So it's like, okay, this thing's going on in your finger, but as long as it doesn't spread, cause other problems in your body. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of why we have a lot of messaging that we're supposed to be perfect, that the body is supposed to be perfect, and the first time that I went to India, I was really struck by the birth defects that I saw. And I was like, why don't I see this at home? And it was like everything, it felt to me like in this country, everything is out in the open. That is not in the US. People are, you don't even see a lazy eye very often. They fix those, when kids are little. And that was like really shocking to me at age 19 to see another place in the world where people didn't just get everything fixed when they were young. Like they don't have those kinds of resources. And it's almost because we have the ability to do all these interventions and fix all this stuff. And it's this thing now with medicine that since we can do all these things, it's difficult to say when. I think we're at this place. We will be at this place probably in the next couple decades, especially with everyone getting old and us having this huge number of elderly people when do we do intervention and when do we leave it? When do we just leave it, And like we're in this lucky place in our lives in the mid 40s where the way that we live our daily life right now is going to buy us so much time. We could feel the same way we do now for or similar for like 15, 20 years if we just kind of pace ourselves, and take care of ourselves. And that is an excellent place to be, especially when we study Ayurveda, because then there's all these tools, to keep the system in this sort of building place. We create a little more building to oppose the natural breakdown, of aging. And there's just not, I just want more information from those who've been here before, like more stories.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up this idea of pacing because fixing requires a lot of resources.
Yeah, I
And
know.
if you're environmentally oriented, you understand that our fixing obsession also has an impact on the planet. Obviously, there's a lot of cost associated with that as well for a healthcare system and for individuals to have to pay for things if they don't have healthcare.
Yeah.
But if we are more comfortable with things not being quote unquote perfect, yeah, what might that look like to be that way a little bit more? And I like how you said, like, pacing. I used to have a teacher, I would say very impatient when I was younger, and everything I wanted it right away. I couldn't understand how I could think something and it wouldn't be there right away. Like, why is it that I could think something and it's not here right now? And his comment to me every time I talked to him was, just sit with it. Just sit with it. Just sit with it. And yeah, so these conversations are really super important. And, even when you look at kind of the cookie cutter health advice that people get from, whether it's the CDC website or the FDA or something like that. I just took a peek actually at the CDC website to see like what kind of exercise do they recommend adults do versus like older people or something like that. And one of the things I found that was interesting was that the CDC says that an 18-year-old and a 64-year-old should exercise the same amount of hours a week.
What?
Like, wait a minute, that's weird.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem very Ayurvedic to me.
Right.
Specifically, it said walking at least 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity activity, such as brisk walking. So 150 minutes. And then at least 2 days a week of activities that strengthen muscles. So it's not like, the 64-year-old is being asked to do anything outrageous or that the 18-year-old isn't being asked to do enough, because you can always like change the degrees of intensity and those things. But I thought that was interesting. And when you get to 65, the only change is activities to improve balance, like, doing tree pose or something like that, right? Because we know that gets super challenging.
Right. Oh, wow. That's so surprising to me. I would think that it would be a little more specific to each life stage or each age. Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that like brisk walking is the best thing, like a half an hour, right? So you do a half an hour brisk walk every day, and then maybe you like lift some like 5-pound weights or 1-pound weights or something like that. 2 days a week or something like that. I could do that.
Yeah. And it probably depends on what you're used to, right? Because I guess when you're 40 and you're lifting 25-pound weights,
right.
Maybe if you go to 10 when you're 65, that will still feel very strengthening, but, that would actually be too intense for somebody else.
Right. Right. Yeah. Where you used to play softball, like you're kind of an athlete or have been an athlete. So what do you do now?
So I have to do something physical every day. I don't do super intense things. For me, it doesn't feel super intense. So I might do anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour of yoga, usually some kind of strong, slow kind of yoga. Mm-hmm. Not very strong, because I think, I did it stronger when I was younger. And then when it's nice weather, I get out and walk for maybe like 20 minutes every day. Or even if it's 10 minutes, I have a little loop that I do that's only 10 minutes. So I don't do a ton of exercise, but I'll tell you, after I got COVID, I really, really, really wanted to get stronger. for some reason. After that, I felt super weak after COVID.
Yeah.
And then I've been doing a lot more muscle building and stuff since then. But I also have, a 5-year-old, he's turning 6. And so I'm doing things with him, when the weather's nice, we're outside doing lots of things outside. And so for me, that's not much. For me, 15 minutes to an hour of yoga a day every day is like nothing, really. It's like routine. When I was younger, like when I was in my mid-30s, I would do 1 to 3 hours of yoga a day.
Yeah.
Just in my personal practice, not teaching or anything like that.
Yeah.
So for me, that's a difference for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've been like surveying all my peers, people in their mid to late 40s in my sort of, I would say, yoga community, and everyone's saying the same thing, what you just said. Everyone's like somewhere around 45 minutes of yoga a day and walking. Everybody says the same thing. It's really interesting to me. And I'm in sort of a similar place.
Well, we need to walk.
We do need to walk.
I went to work in a clinic this weekend, and half the people who came in had hemorrhoids because people are sitting on their butts too much.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's other factors with hemorrhoids, but that's a factor, the sitting on your butt thing. And so we've become much more sedentary, not just because of the pandemic, but because we sit on Zoom all day and stuff like that. So I think, and it makes sense that we should walk, we have bodies.
Definitely. Oh, definitely. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, I guess, to me. But I have to kind of make myself do it sometimes. But I do every day. For me, it's more about being outdoors than the walking. But I have to do it every day, or else I get depressed. That's the thing. That's like the factor that shows itself to me first when my movement or exercise is not correct, is I get depressed. Yeah, it's all the mind for me. But I love to hear that, you having come from such an athletic background, that you can feel satisfied with, whatever, 15 to an hour of yoga and a kind of a short walk. 20 minutes is fairly short. That's about what I do. Same, exactly the same. More like an hour of yoga and like a 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
Good for us.
I know. Occasionally I'll run a little bit, or I don't know. I don't do things where I tax myself too much, I would say, but a little bit, because it feels so good when you're done with it. And, as other health issues, also we benefit when we exercise enough, like sleep. And we know that as people age, the sleep thing is huge. Do you want to talk a little bit about how sleep changes as we get old from the Ayurvedic lens?
I think the things people see most likely are like perimenopause. You've got that waking up in the middle of the night during the pitta time, like midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., maybe sweating, which a lot of that is influenced by late night eating and alcohol. So it's like the liver, the liver's kind of taxed. And the other one is the vata imbalance that wakes you up in the early morning or makes it difficult to have sleep throughout the night, without waking up. So one of my favorite recommendations for that is to take a break during the afternoon cycle of vata between 2 to 6. I can't tell you how much that works. Because as we get older, we move into that vata time of life. And so it's just undeniable that there's going to be more vata manifesting for people in all the different ways that we might see it, one of which is sleep. And I like to look at it like, oh, are you waking up sweating in the middle of the night? Or is your sleep interrupted and you pop up at like 3:30 or 4 in the morning? Because then it's vata in the second example and more pitta in the first. So with the first, I'd look at the food, the alcohol consumption, the intensity through which they're doing stuff, screen time. And then with the vata, if it's that, then we have to look at the more subtle factors, look at the pacing. I mean, I have a lot of vata in my constitution, so I could talk about pacing all day long. Because if I don't pace myself, I lose my mind. I go crazy. Whereas another person, maybe they'll get sick, physically ill. For me, I get mentally ill when I push it. And Sleep for me has been good in my 40s. It's been really good, actually. I just like I know at the end of the day what I should not do. Like, oh, if I do that, and movement is one of those things. Like, I don't exercise in the evening because I won't be able to sleep. Whereas another person might have all this energy in their body that they need to, expel before they go to sleep. But I think the older we get, the less that's true. And the more we need to kind of like have a wind down, and like a vata management before trying to go to bed. Because what I see a lot is people are like going, whoa, and there's all this like activity and sense activity. And then it's like, oh, time for bed. So we go from like 100 miles an hour to zero in 10 minutes. You brush your teeth and you go to bed. Like that, it's normal for that to not work. There's a reason that doesn't work, for a lot of people. And I think the older we get, the more important the wind down is, the shifting gears, and there are a lot of, I think, effective little things that we can do that will improve sleep. And I won't lie, I use valerian when I'm like tweaked out. When I'm working a lot, or when I had to do something, like be on the computer until 8 p.m. or something like that, I will use the herb valerian, and it works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but that's my sleep friend. I've been using valerian since like college. Not all the time. I'm very careful not to use it all the time, but I use it maybe a couple times a month. I'll take it, and it just kind of like, it gets me over that hump into sleep. And then at this stage of life, I'm still pretty much sleeping through the night, which is great.
Some people listening are probably going, she thinks being on the computer till 8 is bad.
Right.
Because you probably have a lot of clients too, where people work super late, past, 10, past 12, sometimes
Right.
even into the early morning hours. And so, yeah, sleep thing gets challenging. So one of the things I thought that could be kind of fun as we wrap up is there's so many things in Ayurveda that are, people feel like they have to do them. Like this is the thing. Like if you do Ayurveda, following Ayurveda means you do this and this and this and this and this. And so people start to get like a little bit religious with it, kind of like blindly following something without like noticing whether it's actually good for their bodies. So I thought it'd be kind of fun if I throw out some self-care techniques, the names of them, and you can tell me yay or nay whether or not you like that therapy for you.
Yeah.
Does that sound fun?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay. So the first one is oil pulling. Yay or nay? You're a nay on oil pulling.
I think it's great, but I don't do it. That would put me over the top with my morning program.
Okay. It's like too much. I can't wait to hear what's in this morning program. Okay. Neti pot.
No, that would be like a podcast unto itself if we were going to get into like nasal passage and stuff going up and in there. Yeah, wow. I do Nasya religiously, but I do not do neti. I used to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so she already answered the Nasya. She's a yay on Nasya.
Yeah, definitely.
What about Abhyanga, the self-oil massage?
Again, when I was religious, I did it a lot. I hate like that my clothes smell like oil, so that's a little bit tricky. So I would say I do it like once a week, not like in the shower every day anymore.
Yeah. Cool. Cleanses.
Absolute yay. Yeah. I really feel like the good health that I enjoy is because I do very moderate cleanse at least once a year.
Chaivan Prash.
That's a good one. I mean, I do a lot of nourishing therapies, so I don't feel like I need it. Yeah, I use herbs in other ways.
Yeah. Basti, enemas.
No, not anymore. I think if I had like a serious problem and that was the cure, fine. But as a preventive thing, no, I don't do it. I used to.
Okay. You used to.
I used to do everything, Heather. I was a religious Ayurvedic zealot. I did it all the time. And it was great because now I know a lot about all those therapies. I know the
Yeah.
pluses and the minuses, how to do them, how they work. And that was great. And then I think I sort of honed in on like, well, what do I actually need? When I'm in a state of health, it's much less than what I might need, So I feel like there's a lot of these like big guns, like panchakarma, like enema. I pull out the big guns when I need them. I don't just do it all the time. And I feel that these therapies retain a potency that way in the body rather than doing it like all the time or, preventively.
Those are the big guns. I'm glad that you said that. Okay. Yoni steaming.
No, but again, I haven't had any imbalances in the artava.
Yeah.
So I haven't. I have done castor oil packs for painful periods in the past. But again, great health in that part of my system. So I don't do much there right now.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And do you put ghee
fun.
all over your food like we're told to do? Do you put ghee like all over everything like apparently everybody in Ayurveda is supposed to do?
I put it, it is the only cooking oil in my house.
Really?
But I don't put it all over everything. But yeah.
Wait, so you don't have olive oil or you have no other cooking oils?
I'll buy olive oil when I want to make hummus.
Oh.
Yeah. And I do know, I should say I have coconut oil for baking because ghee and baking is like, it's too strong tasting. But as far as like roasting, making soups, sauteing, like it's ghee. And that's the way that ghee gets into my body. It's just that I use it for preparing food. I don't really tend to put it on my food. But I've done so much with ghee over so many years that like, I know when to say when with the ghee, especially on my food. I want my food to just be itself. I don't want to cover it with things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about meditation?
I don't like sit and meditate. I don't. It would be good if I did, but I don't. I think I have meditative moments for sure, but I don't like have a practice on a cushion.
It kind of surprises me about you. I would have assumed that you were a big meditator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you seem like your mind is quite clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I observe the mind all the time. All the time. Maybe that's why I don't like sit and do it, like when I'm walking, I know what my mind is doing a lot of the time. And I don't know why that is. Maybe just so many years of studying this stuff. Yeah. So if I sit and observe it, it can be a very intense purification. Just to sit and observe, sit in whatever pattern comes up and just cook and like sweat, and that kind of stuff. But I don't do it regularly. I aspire to that.
Well, there you go.
It's the truth.
Kate O'Donnell dishing on her Ayurvedic. I want to hear about this morning routine though some other time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not super exciting, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for talking with me about aging and dying. I think there'll be a lot more of this to come.
Yeah, we could probably do a few more about dying. It'd be really interesting, I think, to talk with people who are experiencing some pretty significant issues and hear how they're dealing with them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I would love that. Yeah, I would like more of that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for being here today, Kate. Appreciate it. Oh, Kate has a new book coming out as well. When is your book number 4 coming out?
2024.
Okay.
We will have all forgotten about it by then.
I feel like publishers are lengthening their times to market. Have you?
It's a supply chain. In my understanding, it's a supply chain thing. So it takes at least 6 more months for the book to be printed and whatever for it to make its way to a warehouse.
Yeah.
It's
interesting.
Long.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. What's the name of this book?
This is the Ayurveda Book of Women's Health.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah. So we'll have to wait 1.5 years, but then there it will be.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Kate, and we'll get to talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold. I want to thank you for listening to this show. It brings me great pleasure to provide this content to you. I also want to let you know that I'll be making some very amazing announcements soon. And if you're not already on my email list, then I encourage you to go over to my website and subscribe to my email list so that I can keep you informed about these announcements that are going to be coming up very soon. So my website is heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And I look forward to getting these important announcements to you very soon and connecting. Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.